Trudeau's done it again. He's now one step closer to being a dictator. He invoked the emergency powers for the first time they've ever been used in the history of their creation, other than, of course, the War Act, which his father had used. I guess you could say the rotten apple doesn't fall far from the dead tree. But he is taking on more powers than he ever needed for this entire situation. And why don't we let his words do some of the speaking while we clarify what he means afterwards. So taking a look here, this was from, I think about like an hour ago this happened, maybe two. Basically, he came out saying that he's had to invoke these measures because of the protests being violent and shit like that. He's just such a fucking twat.
Here in our capital city, families and small businesses have been enduring illegal obstruction of their neighborhoods, occupying streets, harassing people, breaking the law. This is not a peaceful protest. At the borders in different parts of the country, the blockades are harming our economy and endangering public safety. Critical supply chains have been disrupted. This is hurting workers who rely on these jobs to feed their families.
I just want to pause it there for a second. So first thing he said is he's immediately blaming the truckers for this problem. He is saying it's not a peaceful protest. There's been no violence, no vandalism, nothing, except from on the side of the counter-protesters that are using the Nazi flags and telling all the unvaccinated to be gassed. But he's not talking about that. Why is it that all of a sudden, if you're protesting on his side of the fence, you don't have to be labeled terrorists, or you don't have to be labeled violent or harassing people? All of this is just a ploy for him. It's a way for him to have even more power. Just because it's probably similar to his bloodline. I mean, he is pretty close to Castro, or at least his mother was. So maybe it's just something that seems to be genetically inclined in him. But everything he's said about these truckers so far has been an outright lie. So yes, he did say something true where they were affecting the economy, but that's his fault. He's been affecting the economy for 2 years, and now it's almost irreparable. So what's wrong with affecting it for 2 weeks if it got you off your ass, but all it did was make you more of a dictator? Anyways, let's keep going. Let's let him put more of his foot in his mouth.
Despite their best efforts, it is now clear that there are serious challenges to law enforcement's ability to effectively enforce the law.
And there's a reason for that. The reason that there is a problem for them to be able to enforce the law is that the protesters aren't breaking any. They can't enforce a law that isn't being broken. They are only going to be broken if you enact this power. If you put emergency powers into effect, then these protests become illegal. This was all a ploy for him to be able to get to the point where he wanted them to be illegal, so now he can use these powers to then silence his opposition. That's essentially what's happened here. The reason police couldn't do anything about it was because it was not illegal. Anyway, let's keep going.
Today, to continue building on these efforts, the federal government is ready to use more tools at its disposal to get the situation fully under control. After discussing with Cabinet and caucus, after consultation with premiers from all provinces and territories, after speaking with opposition leaders, the federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
Correction. After speaking with all the people in Parliament, he disregarded everything they said, and he decided to invoke these laws. He had decided to invoke these powers. Because this should have been something that needed to be debated for a week minimum. He's invoking these because he can. Because he's at a point where he has enough control where he can just manipulate the situation and get people on his side. And even if they're not on his side now, they'll be on his side until he has a vote of no confidence. It's just absurdity that he's trying to include every single one of these parliamentary people and premiers acting like they're on his side. But in reality, he probably took all of the negative feedback that he got from it and just went, boop, 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 I'm Trudeau, I can do whatever I want. That's essentially what's gone on here.
To supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
Not an occupation anymore.
I want to be very clear.
This is bullshit.
The scope of these measures will be time limited geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate.
Do you know who said that once before too? I'll give you a little hint. He had a toothbrush mustache. This guy is not going to give up these powers. He's been given them. They're not going away. They're not going to be time limited. They're not going to be geographically centered on something. They're going to be Canada-wide as long as he has them. And I guarantee you it's going to be dangerous. Having him with that much power, it's scary to think about. Because now he also has access to all of the banking side of things. He can freeze any account just for any kind of suspicion without warrant or anything. And I'll get into that in a second after this.
To the threats they are meant to address. The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country. This is about keeping Canadians safe.
No, it's about keeping him in power and keeping him rich. He's getting so many kickbacks from the pharmaceutical companies, it's unreal. So he is lying through his teeth. Look at that little smirk he's got on his fucking face. He knows what he's doing, and he knows people are eating this shit up, especially his supporters, because, you know what? Sheep are always going to follow the shepherd. They're not going to question it. But he is lying to everybody. This is one of the biggest lies I've ever seen him tell.
Protecting people's jobs and restoring confidence in our institutions.
Well, there's a problem with that, because if he wanted that to be the case from the very beginning, what he would have done was not screw everybody over with these mandates and cost millions of people their work, their jobs, their livelihoods, their lives. It's all on him, and he's blaming everyone else because he can't take responsibility. So anyways, let's go a little bit further down here and just see what the Emergencies Act is actually going to do for him. So the Emergencies Act is the modern-day replacement to the War Measures Act. It allows the federal government to force companies to provide services. It can require public protests to end and limit mobility rights by preventing people from moving to designating areas. In other words, he can restrict your freedoms even further. This invocation of the Act also brings in strict new financial measures, requiring crowdfunding sites to register with FinTrack, the country's ranking watchdog, and allowing the government to freeze corporate accounts and potentially seize trucks that are on the scene in the protests. The Act also allows for the military to be used as police, but several sources said that this is not under active consideration. That means it's under passive consideration, which means it's on the table. So he can use this if people don't comply. And what's he going to do? He is going to use these powers if people decide they've had enough. And it's getting to the point where he is slowly becoming a dictator. Like, any further he goes with this, he loses every single face. And he's got a lot of faces. And all of those faces want to stab you in the back if it means he gets higher up. Don't you think for 1 second he is not going to use the military. He will do it. He's just as shitty as his father. He will use them. I guarantee it. He already said that he wasn't considering doing this today. Look what happened. Came out immediately that he was going to do it. And then it's already passed. This guy is a walking lie. Trudeau stressed the military will not be called in, that the act is being used in a restrained fashion to deal with the situation at hand. But here's the problem with this act. It doesn't have any restraint. He can use whatever one of those powers he wants to. We just have to trust that he's not going to do it, when in reality he will. When he's pushed into a corner, which he basically is at this point, which is why he's doing this instead of just removing the mandates like majority of people want, he's making it worse on himself and his followers. Because they will be punished for being on the wrong side of history. If any military person or any police officers follow these laws and do what he wants, it's going to be Nuremberg all over again, man. There's no way that this is going to work out the way that he thinks it will. The scopes of these measures will be time limited. Incorrect. If you wanted time limited, well, I mean, actually, you know what? We have a perfect example of what time limit means to him. Look at the mandates. It went from 2 weeks to 2 years, and now he's even making them stricter. And he's pushing them even harder than before. There is no such thing as a time limit with this man. Geographically targeted. Yeah, I guess technically that's correct, but I guess if you're looking at it, it will be all of Canada as a geographic point. Sure as shit, not going to be one city. As well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address. See? He's already trying to stir up more controversy, more violence, more divisiveness. There are no threats. The only threats are him with power. That's the threat. So what's he going to do? Get himself arrested? No. He's going to arrest all the people that are trying to fight for us to be less of a communist nation than we already are becoming. And all of his followers are giving him a round of applause in the background. Well, I'll tell you this. If you like Trudeau's way of running the country, why don't you move to China or Russia or North Korea and tell me how you like government overreach? Tell me how you like their communist ideas. Because at this point, you don't stand for freedom. You stand for Trudeau to put you on a leash and lead you where he wants you to go. And it's just sad. It's sad that not enough people in the world want to think freely. It's so disappointing, because at this point, there is no turning back for him. Now that he's invoked this, he'll never have a career in politics ever again. The world is watching, and he's just made us an even bigger joke than we already are now. And this just has to end. I know that the truckers have come out and said that they're not going to be moved by fuck, what was it called? They're not going to be moved by the stupid Emergencies Act. They're going to stay put. But the question is now, what is Trudeau going to do now that he has the full range of military and police? He can treat this like it's a terrorist group. He's actually already come out calling them terrorist group. Well, maybe not him, but his deputy prime minister did. And that's really sad. It's really sad that you're a terrorist when you think freely and you want others to have the ability to think for themselves. When in reality, the ones that are trying to silence the ones fighting for freedom, they're the true terrorists. They live life wanting everybody to be as reserved as they want to be. They want to live life like everybody is just as miserable as they are. And it's just so sad to see. And I really, really hope we get a vote of no confidence on this fucking idiot. Because that's all he is. A moron. A moron who had a silver spoon up his ass because his father was a prime minister. And not a good one. It's just so weird to see how his son ended up being even worse. Who would have guessed, right? Anyways, guys, I will be covering this a whole lot more as stuff keeps going. So if you want to be a part of it, please feel free to subscribe. If you don't, by all means, watch and leave at whatever works for you. You like it, you like it. If you don't like it, dislike it. I still see them. So if you want to hurt my feelings, go for it. And if you want to have a conversation, like always, leave a comment down below. I'll try to respond to whoever leaves a comment. Anyways, guys, I will hopefully have some more news on this, and hopefully some good news, because this is some of the worst news I think we could have ever expected. Anyways, guys, love you all. Bye-bye.